Hey y'all, everybody's favorite Bumpkin here. Please excuse my slightly glossy and disheveled appearance right now. What can I say? It's hot. It's Florida. It's like stupid hot. So, guys, I'm going to apologize in advance. If there's a little bit of glare or something in some of the shots, hey, please keep in mind I'm trying to do everything I possibly can out here in the garage to, help educate you guys and also bring you the info that I want to show you and that I feel that you need to see. But on the same page, I'm trying my damnedest to keep from, let's see here, basically withering away into a husk and unaliving myself into a pile of 6 foot tall bumpkin jerky. Yeah, it's that level of hot, guys. Sorry, it is what it is. So moving on from that, where are we with the shovel head? Well, when we last left off, I had my heads built, had the valves lapped and all that. Small speed bump during the reassembly process. My valve stem seals, yeah, they didn't fit. And I will totally own that one because that was my bonehead mistake for not taking the time to measure the valve guide diameter correctly. I just went off an assumption, and hey, y'all know what that means. Yeah, me. And this is where my hubris, if you will, came full circle to taunt me on the backside of my folly. Even though my valve stem seals are in transit right now, they are taking the long wandering road, shall we say, and basically they're on a cross-country sightseeing tour of this great nation of ours because they shipped from St. Louis, and somehow, instead of going from St. Louis to Atlanta to Tampa, which is the norm, they went from St. Louis to Kansas City, and then they went to somewhere in North Dakota, and then South Dakota. I guess they wanted to stop in and check out the Sturgis crew. Last time I saw them on tracking info, they were in Nevada, which is obviously going the wrong way. So right now, I am at the mercy of the guy that drives the big brown truck. So basically right now, my valve stem seals are more lost than a damn Jehovah's Witness in the middle of a furry convention, okay? Now think about that. Take all the time you need. That's either really, really lost or a dream come true. Depends on which side of the aisle you're on there. So in the meantime, we got to make some progress on the shovel head here. That way, whenever I eventually get my valve stem seals to where we can get the heads put back together and get the top end of the motor buttoned up, we're not going to be standing around with our thumb up our butt waiting on everything else. So come on, let's jump into it. Let's build a cam chest in this thing. All right, guys. Now, the last time y'all saw this thing was when we were tearing it down and just doing the breakdown on the motor, all right? Now, if y'all remember, we're putting a new cam cover on here, but there's a couple of critical dimensions that you have got to check, whether you're doing just a freshen up rebuild or if you're replacing parts like we are right now, because that's going to affect your total tolerance on a few areas. One of the more critical dimensions that you need to check here whenever you're in the cam chest on a nose cone motor, be it shovel head, pan head, Evo, yada yada, basically any single cam motors like what we're dealing with on the old shovel head here that use the nose cone of the cam cover to support the end of the cam. You have to check your cam end float or your end play. Harley's kind of all over the page on this as far as what they've told people over the years. Back in early years, they told you, 10 to 20 thousandths of an inch, shoot for 15. And that kind of held true through the shovel head era. And then actually in the mid part of the shovel head era, the spec changed a little bit here and there, but not a real big amount. And then came the Evo. Early Evo, yeah, it still held up to the old shovel head spec. Generally, depending on what your year range was, they'd tell you anywhere from 20 to 30 thousandths was all right. Now, maybe a little bit off on that because I'm going off of memory here. And see, gray hair, yeah, that tends to kind of erode the accuracy of the memory bank a little bit. But calm down, put away the pitchforks, guys. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close to this. Now, this is where things get interesting. When they revamped the Evo Big Twin in 91 and they made it breathe out through the heads, that's when they threw the whole idea of maintaining cam end float to a specific amount pretty much out the damn window, because they tell you anything from 1,000th of an inch to 90 thousandths of an inch. Basically a gap big enough you can throw a damn car through, okay? I don't entirely agree with that from a personal standpoint. Regardless of what I'm working on, I try to check my spec and keep my tolerance down to where I have a maximum of 20 to 25 thousandths of an inch of end float, but I want to make sure I've got a minimum, and that's a minimum of 15 thousandths, because things change, things grow, things expand. Well, here, let me show you. Think about it like this, guys. You got your camshaft. Well, this end right here, that's rolling around in the bearing that presses into the inner cam chest wall on the cases of the motor. And then you got the big chunky end out here. Ain't no bearing out here. You got a brass or bronze bushing, depending on what it is and what year it is. You got that bushing in the nose cone. That's what this end rides in. It's not a bearing, it's a bushing. You've got a thrust washer with a spacer shim, and this shim here, that's what sets your end float on the cam. That little guy goes there. This little guy right here, he goes up against the interior wall of the cam chest. This is a thrust face. This is a thrust face. If you see that little polished ring on the cam gear there, that's where that cam gear rides up against the thrust face of the bushing and the cam cover. So you got to have room for everything to grow, because this chunk of steel camshaft, it's not going to swell up as much as the aluminum that's around it on both sides. So what happens is whenever the aluminum gets warm, it has a tendency to try to meet in the middle. Well, it's got a camshaft caught there in between it. So you got to make sure you got enough running clearance for whenever the motor is cold, but you've also got to make sure that you're allowing yourself enough room for running clearance whenever the motor is hot, because they're not always going to expand at the same place, and they're not always going to expand at the same rate. Also, this would be a good time to point out to you guys, whenever you're checking the dimensions on a camshaft for end play like this, make sure that you are doing it with the cam cover gasket in place, and make sure it's the same type and brand of gasket that you plan to use. Preferably, you're going to want to do these checks with the actual gasket that you're going to use. But hey, things happen, stuff can get damaged, everybody has an oopsie. If you goof your gasket up, make sure you buy the same thing. That way it doesn't throw your measurements off and put all that time you invested into it out the window. Okay, now that I got all my parts cleaned up and everything, let me go over a couple things with you guys. See? Pretty, new, shiny, polished. You notice I said polished. I didn't want to go back with chrome on this thing because it's got a lot of chrome on the bike, but it doesn't have a whole lot of chrome on the motor outside of fasteners. So if I put a chrome cam cover on this thing, that would have looked a little bit odd. And, you know, we're trying to make this thing look like it just came through the time warp from the 70s. So, hey, yeah, polish it is. That's the order of the day. Now, this cover came from Ted's V-Twin. I know a lot of you guys preach about Taiwan Teds, and yes, I have gotten some questionable stuff from them in the past. But I'm picky about what I shop for, okay? So, moving on. Now, what we're doing here is we are measuring the end float, or the end play, if you will, on the camshaft whenever it gets sandwiched between this surface of the cover and the interior wall of the cam chest. A couple things that we need to point out here that'll make things a lot simpler for you guys if this is the first time you're ever doing a job like this. Number one, this is a brand new cover. Now, that being said, the tolerance in this bushing is probably going to be a little on the snug side. So don't be surprised if it's a, you know, real tight fit and you got to fiddle with it a little bit. If it's been run in for a while, those parts are already going to be burnished. Clearances are going to loosen up a little bit. It's going to go in there a whole lot easier. So just be aware of it. They sent me a hardware kit for this thing that's got the cam cover screws, a new nose cone seal, all that stuff. Leave the seal out while you're doing this. If you're using an old nose cone, go ahead and pull that seal out of there. That way you're not fighting the drag of that seal when you're trying to measure your end play on the cam cover. And then also, they gave me a cam cover gasket. Now, this is run-of-the-mill plain Jane paper. Now, a couple things to note here. This motor was originally put together with one of the James beaded silicone gaskets, and by nature, they're thicker than what a plain paper gasket is. Okay, cool. That's going to change our tolerance a little bit right there, hypothetically. Considering the fact that you've got a couple of areas that are not very well supported on the cam cover on pretty much any cone motor, be it Shovelhead or Evo, I like using the Cometic gaskets a lot better than the plain papers. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, the Cometic gaskets, they're an AFM or aerated foam material that's bonded onto a aluminum gasket cutout. If you look real close there, you can probably see that little bit of aluminum peeking out in between the layers of the sealing surface. Yeah, that's because basically it's an aluminum frame with gasket surface on both sides of it. And the aluminum only allows for a certain amount of compression, but it won't split like a plain paper gasket will. Also, the AFM material, in my opinion, it does a better job of conforming to irregular surfaces. If you've got a little bit of warpage, if you got a little bit of oopsie spot here and there, this is going to go this is going to go a lot longer towards sealing those problem areas up to where you don't have a case of the leakies like you typically get. Now, I didn't have enough of the original cam cover gasket that I could salvage to where I could measure it that came off clean on both sides for comparison, but typically the James silicone beaded gaskets, they measure out about 30,000ths of an inch thick when they're compressed. That's when they're installed. Think about it, gaskets are squishy. They're going to squash down just a little bit, but not all gaskets squish down the same. Now, assuming we're going off of our 30,000ths inch compressed thickness on the James gasket, let's measure this plain paper gasket that Ted's gave us. This is hard, y'all. Hang on a second. Yay, talking hands time. Okay, back to measuring our shit. Now, old school dial caliper, you can see right here, it's zeroed out. I've had this thing for years and it is dead nuts reliable. Let's measure our gasket that Ted's gave us. That may be a little hard for you guys to read, but that's right at about 31,000ths. Now that's without any compression, that's just grabbing the gasket. Now let's measure our Cometic. Just to keep it honest, we're going to do it in the same general area. Oh, looky there. Focus. Focus. We're close, but that Cometic gasket's a little bit thicker. We're sitting at about 32, 33, depending on where and how you measure it. Now here's where things get interesting. The Cometic gasket, just by design, the sealing surfaces itself, the actual foam coat that's on there, that is softer than what the gasket paper is. So it's going to squish more. Now, yeah, it's a couple thousandths of an inch fatter. We're not terribly far off from what our assumed compressed thickness is with the James gasket, but this is where we put our money where our mouth is, all right? Let's throw the cam in this thing, put some bolts in it, torque it down, and let's actually check it with a feeler gauge to see just how much in clearance we got on the thing. Bought me a new handiest ratchet in the world. Harbor Freight's done a small redesign on these things, and since this is the first time that I've had the new version of it, time will tell. Let's see if the new stuff's as good as the old, or if they cheaped out and built a flaming piece of crap and decided to sell it for the same price. Now that is going in there a little bit snug because, like I said, we've got slightly different tolerances on our cam and crank bushing, but also the holes where the dowel pin indexes the nose cone on the cam chest. They ain't never had a dowel pin put in them. It's going to be a little snug going in there. Just don't gronk on it and force the thing into place and you'll be totally fine. And that bolt's too long to go there. It doesn't belong there. Let's put this guy down here at the bottom. I know a lot of guys will just put these two bolts in here whenever they're measuring for cam in play. And, you know, that makes sense. I prefer to put them here, here, and here. That way I know that I'm getting that cover put in all the way flush and square. And actually, Ted's was nice enough that they went ahead and included new cam cover bolts with this thing. And we're in good there. Y'all hear that clicky clicky from the calibrated elbow? Yeah, thought so. Now, joking aside, yes, there is a torque spec to follow here, and basically what it works out to, on average, is roughly 10 foot-pounds. That's reasonably snug in my definition. Doing a setup like this, don't Conan the thing, but make sure you put it under a little bit of torque. That way you've got compression on your gasket. That way you're keeping it honest, because 10 foot-pounds is not going to compress that gasket that much. Let's measure our clearance down here through the lifter block hole. And what we're looking for is we're going to take a feeler gauge and we're going to drop, here, let me show you guys. Okay, way less confusing if I can show you rather than just blabber on and explain it, okay? So what we're going to do here, we've got our cover bolted down and our hardware is snug-ish to spec-ish, but it's close-ish enough to get us done where we're doing right now. But what we're doing, we're going to take a feeler gauge and we're going to put it right down there in that hole, and we're going to measure in between the back of the cam, and we're going to measure in between that and the original backup washer while we're working the cam back and forth to see what our total in play is. Hang on, let's set that up. All right, guys. Unnecessary zoom version of talking hands. Yay! Now, the reason I set this up is because whenever you're measuring the inflow on a cam, look right down in here. Hear that little knocking noise? That's me rocking the cam back and forth, floating in between the bushing and the bearing. I try to make it a point to always measure it from the rear tappet block hole. That's why I got the camera here at the front of the motor pointing back. That way you guys can see what I'm doing, but also so I can get in there straight and get a good accurate measurement. Because if you notice, these tappet block bores are slightly offset from one another. The rear is inset further towards the case, and if you go down through the rear tappet block hole like I'm going to do here, you're going to have a straight shot down to that thrust face where you can get an accurate measurement that's going to be repeatable and not something that's going to lead you astray because you're going at it at an angle. So just starting out from a calibrated ichrometer standpoint here, let's try 40 thousandths and see what that gets us. So we're all the way out. And nope, won't go. Let's drop her down to 35 and see where we're at. 35 thousandths. Survey says, no, still a little on the tight side. Won't quite get there. Let's go for 30. I generally do this in steps of 5 thousandths of an inch. That way it can save me some time, but it lets me zero in on where I'm trying to measure at. Nope, 30 ain't going. I'm starting to get a little nervous here, guys, because I may end up having to swap the shim out in this thing. Let's try 25 and see where we get. Yep, 25 don't want to play. How about a 20? Oh, hey, look there. By God, now we're cooking with grease. And that's a nice snug fit. I'm not having to force it in there, but you can definitely feel a little bit of drag on it. Okay, so just to keep things honest, let's try our feeler gauge in between our thrust washer and our adjustment shim. I got a little bit of oil sticks in here. That's why I got a pick down in here. It's just to help break the two apart a little bit so I can get my feeler gauge in there. And yeah, we feel good with the 20 there. It feels real good with the 20. I've got no discernible play in that whatsoever. And just to give you guys a heads up on how I'm moving this cam, I've got a small machine screw that's about, an inch or so long that I got screwed into the snout of the cam, basically just to give me something to grab a hold of. But that is nice. 20 thousandths, that's so damn close to what I would call perfect, I will take that all day long. Ugh. Oh, sorry guys. I had to hydrate and caffeinate, okay? Bear with me. It's hot out here. It's rough on a fat kid in Florida. Now, Andrew specs 10 to 15 thousandths of an inch of cam in play on their cams in shovelhead and Evo applications. Now, we just measured 20 on this thing. That's too much, right? Yes and no. Now, let me explain. I did not arrive at 20 thousandths of an inch as some arbitrary number that I pulled out of the ether or something I figured, well, you know what, we're going to give it just a smidge more just on good, just for good principle. I like using the Cometic AFM gaskets on nose cone motors because they got a little more give. They got a little more squish. They accommodate for irregular surfaces better. And a lot of these motors, these things have been passed around more than a bottle of Crown at a Florida Georgia Line concert, guys. They ain't always going to be flat and square. However, with our spec being between 10 and 15 thousandths of an inch, and I just torqued this thing down and I measured it out at 20, and by the way, the feeler gauge thing, that's how Harley explains to measure for cam in play in their factory service manuals on these bikes. I know a lot of guys are going to jump through all kind of hoops and they're going to jig up a dial indicator on the end of the camshaft. If your level of OCD requires that, hey, Bubba, rock on. You do you, boo. 20 thousandths of an inch, that's going to work totally fine in our case here. Let me explain why. These are an AFM gasket. That being said, they are going to compress slightly more than a conventional paper gasket or one of the James Prentice-Seal beaded silicone gaskets. After a couple of heat cycles, when we first pop this motor off, run it, get it hot, let it cool down, get it hot, let it cool down, I always, on my normal fasteners like nose cone, oil pump bolts, rocker boxes, things like that, I put a wrench on them just to double check, because after you heat cycle the motor and that motor grows a little and then it relaxes and then it grows and then it relaxes, after you do that a couple times, things kind of move around just a little bit. So if I'm showing 20 right now, and after I heat cycle this motor a few times, and say I go back and I check my cam cover bolts and I give all of them just a little because they've sacked off just a little bit, hey, guess what, guys? That movement's going somewhere and it's coming in together. What this means is this gives me a bit of a window, per se, to where I can account for gasket compression, thermal expansion, and also the inevitable bolt stretch and bolt thread stretch. Those are two different things. When I'm talking about bolt stretch, now granted, on a bolt that torques to 10 foot-pounds, that bolt right there, yeah, ain't much odds of you stretching that thing that much. However, the threads in the case, that's another story. Because think about it. We've got coarse threads in an aluminum case, and no telling how many times they've been torqued and released over the years. That thread is going to shift ever so slightly. It's going to deform. It's going to try to pull towards the outside of the bolt hole. When it does that, you're losing bolt torque. So you got to snug it back up, and that's going to draw that gasket surface and that thrust surface back in ever so slightly. Now, in all honesty, if we were talking about a slightly different motor platform here, say a panhead or an early slab shovel that's got a circuit breaker, i.e. a distributor in there, you've got a circuit breaker shaft in there that drives the distributor. Now, when you're dealing with one of those motors, yes, absolutely. Cam in play, that becomes a little bit more critical. You got to get it down to just, a hair of a gnat's ass, a little bit closer in tolerance. But for a shovel head, we're totally fine. We're going to be well within our safe zone. And at the end of the day, if we do wind up a couple of thousandths past that 15 thousandths of an inch recommended in play, the only thing that's going to happen is that's going to allow just a little bit more camshaft infloat, which in turn will allow a little bit more lubricant flow to that bushing in the nose cone. Because remember, guys, that bushing is a bushing, not a bearing. So it needs a little bit of help to where it can get some oil in there. Also, that's going to do a better job of letting our needle bearing on the inboard side get additional oiling there, because it's opening up that gap in that shim to allow a little bit more oil to fall in there, because that bearing is entirely splash lube. It has no forced oil supply. It doesn't have an oil journal. It ain't got squat. It's just relying on what's getting flung around inside the case there to hopefully, keep it wet and keep it happy. Slight sidebar there. If the little stubby guy is hanging out in the comments, yeah, y'all know him, Bucket Buck Brown. Hey, brother, I had a hell of a good time the other night hanging out with you. Got a chance to eat some good food, sit down, catch up on things. My brother Buck was in town. He called me up, said, hey, I'm going to be there for a few days. Sure, hell yeah, come on out, dude. Now, I'm not entirely happy about the way he shanghaied the bill there and snuck off and paid for it, even though I told him not to. So, Buck, this is your notice. You're going to get yours one way or the other, okay? And no, it ain't a competition, but you know what? That's what you call getting right. Speaking of Bucket Buck, he's got a birthday coming up here real damn soon, y'all, so keep an eye out for that. Wish my stubby little compadre, my poncho to my lefty, my singing buddy at the campouts, let's keep an eye out for that here in the coming weeks and wish him a big-ass happy birthday because, hey, one more orbit. Good on you, brother. Damn glad to have you here, and I'm damn proud to call you my friend. And since we're on the subject of hatching days here, I would like to take a minute to brag on my beautiful and talented and beloved wife unit. Congratulations, baby, on one more orbit around the sun. I love you. I have no idea what I would do without you in my life. Chances are the clock on the VCR would still be blinking, and the microwave too. You know how that goes. But in all honesty, happy birthday, honey. I love you, and I tolerate you. And please don't poison anything in the fridge. All right, now that we got that out of the way, and no, I'm not saying that in a bad way. It just, y'all know me, randomness abounds, okay? It popped into my head, and here we are. Since we got that done and over with, Let's get the cam back out of the nose cone here. Let's get the nose cone cleaned up. Let's get a seal pushed in this thing. Let's go ahead and put the cam and the breather gear in there and get everything timed up on our timing marks, which I'm not going to bother to show you guys because you got a mark here, and a mark here. You got 3 lines you got to line up. Boom, one and done, okay? I have missed having this here at the house. Yes! Pop you out of there. There we go. All right. Gasket can hang out there. We got to push the seal in this cam cover. That way it's ready to reinstall and go back into place. Let me show you something real quick. There's a seal that Ted's gives you for the cam cover. Looks like a normal seal, right? Yeah, pretty much is. Now here's the thing. The seal that Ted's gives you for this cam cover, it's the new style rubber clad seal. And in most cases, I agree with this. However, Cometic has enough forethought, and it may be from a cost-saving measure, it may be just something that they've seen as, you know, issues that they decided they were going to address, but Cometic gives you the old style metal clad seal. Exhibit B, metal body seal. Now, dimensionally, these seals are the same. See, they're the same diameter, same thickness, roughly, same bore diameter, obviously, it has to be. However, I prefer using the metal clad seal as opposed to the rubber seal, and I'll explain why. Both of these are a double lip seal. If you look close, you might be able to see it, you might not, who knows. Both of these are a double lip seal. However, with the metal clad seal, once you push this into the cavity on the nose cone, it's going to grab the bore in the nose cone where the seal presses in and lives better than what the rubber is, because the rubber is squishy. Now, this doesn't happen very often, but I have seen it happen in the past. And this is a perfect storm type of affair, so, you know, keep that in mind. However, I've seen in the past where when you use the late model style seal, if you have a carburetor problem where the carburetor runs over and it floods the motor down and you don't realize it, it fills the cylinders up full of gas, and eventually that gas is going to leach down past the piston rings. It's going to wind up in the bottom end. If you have enough of that gas build up in the bottom end, and if the bike sits for a while, this rubber oil seal, it'll soften. And when you're not expecting it, what'll happen when you crank the bike over to start it, whenever it's sneezing and blowing all the crap out of the bottom end, especially if you're not aware that the thing's washed down with fuel, it'll push this seal out. The metal body seal, it does a lot better job of staying put because the body of the seal is not going to be affected by the gasoline, and it's not going to get slimy or try to swell up and push itself out of that bore in the nose cone. Think about it, guys. And there we go. See, it's home. Now, this seal presses in flush with the face of this nose cone on the interior pocket. Resist the urge to bash the crap out of it with a hammer just to make sure, because what will happen, you'll deform the body of this seal and it'll actually loosen up the fit of that thing in the bore of the nose cone, and then you'll be wondering, why in the hell is this thing leaking? Ugh, it's hot, and my hair shows it. Okay, let's talk about assembly here, guys. I've used this stuff right here for years. Old school Permatex Ultra Slick. And there's a reason. It works, it's sticky, it stays put where you put it. The good thing is, this is a liquid. There's no solids in it. You know, it's not like the old lubricate grease or white lithium, stuff like that. You don't have to worry about clods of it coming off in the oiling system and potentially washing into the filter media on your oil filter and restrictive flow through the oil filter. This stuff will liquefy inside of engine oil virtually instantly whenever it comes into contact with it, but it gives it enough startup protection to where it's got a film there. It's going to slick it up where it needs, and it's going to give it that extra little bit of cushion until the blood gets flowing, so to speak. That way you don't have to worry about anything galling or sticking together or trying to smear metal off. Now, I don't have any of this stuff mixed up here at the temple because, honestly, I forgot. However, I kind of like to take this a step further. At work, I've got a big jar of Vaseline that sits on my workbench. Okay, guys, Get it out of your system. Laugh it up. Come on. Come on. I'll wait. Okay. Now that we can all be adults and serious about it. Yeah, right. The reason I've got the big jar of Vaseline, Vaseline is nothing more than petroleum jelly, i.e., it's really thick oil. So what you do, you take the big jar of Vaseline, and then you take half a bottle of this stuff, which would be 2 ounces, you put it in the jar of Vaseline. And I'm talking one of the big flip-top jars. That way you can keep all the crap and gunk out of it, all right? You want to keep that stuff clean because you're using it for assembly lube. Take the Vaseline, put it on a hot plate very carefully so you don't melt the jar, or put it in a toaster oven, again, very carefully so you don't get caught by your significant other. I mean, melt the jar and create a mess or a potential fire hazard. Vaseline will liquefy at a relatively low temperature. By itself, it liquefies at about 130, 140 degrees, something like that. Now, when you put this stuff in there and you mix it up, what you get is a gelatinized version of the old school ultra slick assembly lube, but it stays where you put it. It won't drain away. It doesn't drip off. It doesn't leave a mess everywhere. And plus also, like if you've got a shim that you need to hold in place while you're assembling a subcomponent, put a little dab of that stuff on there. It's goopy enough. It holds everything in place. But again, it instantly liquefies and it will dissolve into motor oil. It will not plug up an oil filter. The more you know. Plus also, if you mix up I think it's like a 8-ounce jar of the Vaseline with 2 ounces of this stuff in there, it'll last you forever from a DIY standpoint. And it works on more than just putting motors together. Motors, transmissions, primaries, valve train stuff. I use a lot of it in valve train stuff. It's very versatile because it has an extremely low melt point. Basically, everything that you put into this motor is going to liquefy and dissolve into the oil supply within the first couple of minutes of runtime. But by that time, assuming everything is healthy with your oiling system, you're going to have consistent and continuous oil flow all throughout the system. You don't have to worry about it. The assembly lube has done its job, but it's not going to plug up your oil filter to where you've got to worry about it restricting flow or anything like that. Hey guys, check us out. Remember how I told y'all that this cam bushing here, it doesn't get any pressurized lube? Well, that is why. You see that little bitty hole right there? That's where it catches oil. It gets slung around inside the cam chest and it funnels it down through that hole, and that is how it oils the cam bushing in the nose cone on a shovel head or an Evo or a pan. Now, again, this is partly why I like to have a little bit more clearance there than what the book spec is, because the more side-to-side clearance you have here, the less possibility you're going to have of this getting hot, growing, and coming out and galling this thrust face on the cam bushing. But whenever I'm putting a cam cover on, here's something I like to do on these. Take your bottle of goop here, or our sexy homebrew motion lotion. Put you a drop or two in that little oiler hole there and let it find its way down into the bushing. And then take your finger, work it around inside there to where you get a good even coat. While you're there, make sure you smear some on the lip of the oil seal, because you don't want that oil seal running dry. Because if it starts up dry, there's a very good chance that it's going to overheat and either melt the lip of the oil seal or tear it, and then you're going to be wondering, why in the hell do I have an oil leak there? Remember, there's always time for lubricant. Now, the bushing in the nose cone that supports the pinion shaft on the crank, that does get pressurized oil, because that's how it oils the crank and the rods. But just for good principle and just for cheap insurance, we're still going to put a little bit of goober lube on the inside of that thing, just to where we can give it a little bit of extra slickum to keep it from galling or scarring something up when we first crank this thing over. And lastly, before we put it into the cavity, the breather gear, because that's got to get some too. Because think about it, this breather gear just rotates around in its bore inside the cam chest. You damn sure don't want that going in there dry, because it's not going to be a pleasant experience for all parties involved. She might protest. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to bother showing you guys how these cam gears time in. Really? Did y'all think I was not going to show you that? That's important shit, and there's stuff to be learned. Here, let's check it out. Whee! All right, guys, check it out here, okay? Harley cam timing is very simple, but do not confuse cam timing with crank or ignition timing. They're two separate things, okay? Now, let me point out a couple things. Real simple. You roll your crank over to where your timing mark is here at 12 o'clock, and then your first timing mark on the camshaft here will index with that timing mark on the pinion gear on the crank. Then your breather gear will have a timing mark here that indexes with this dot on the cam here at approximately 8 o'clock. Some of you eagle eyes out there, you may notice this little mark right here, that little guy. Don't worry about that little guy. The thing is, on early Harley Big Twins from 54 to 77, they all use the same pinion gear. That means that this mark here is for an early model panhead or slab shovel. This is a timing mark for your circuit breaker gear. Do not, I repeat, do not confuse this guy for this guy, because not only is your cam timing going to be woefully retarded, then also you're never going to get your marks to line up, because that dot is on a tooth. That line is on a tooth. So that means your dot would fall either here or here. It's never going to line up. If something don't look right, it's because it ain't right, okay? Slow your roll. Stop. Think about it. Apply some gray matter. Now, in all seriousness here, guys, I still got to check my endplay on my breather gear, but here's the thing. I had endplay before. I'm using a similar thickness gasket, and my endplay on my breather gear is nowhere near as critical as what my endplay on my camshaft is. Granted, yes, if you pull a bonehead move and you put a massively thick end shim on there, no, the cover's not going to set up there just right, and it's going to bind up and it's going to be proud. You'll know that as soon as you try to turn the bottom end over, because it's going to be turning hard. It's not going to turn freely. And also, we've not changed anything in the breather on this. So, therefore, we're good to go. Now, let's bolt the cam cover on this thing. That way we can get the bottom end, at least in that respect, buttoned up. And that way we can move on to something else. One more quick eyeball check, just for sanity's sake. Make sure our marks are good here and here. Yep, we're good. Take our gasket and lay him in place there. Grab our nose cone. Beautiful. That's the way they're supposed to go together. Ew, that was gross. Ew. It looks like my Teflon dope needs a big orange pill. Now, I may catch a little bit of flack from this, but hear me out, okay? The bolts that go into the cam covers on a cone motor, you've got a couple of bolt holes that are always going to have threads that are exposed to the cam chest area. That's going to give you a leak path for oil to creep around those threads and potentially show up as a small oil seep somewhere out here on the nose cone. Now, the book doesn't specify it, but I prefer to take a little bit of Teflon paste and put it on the threads. That way it acts as a thread seal, but also once that Teflon dope cures, it acts as a really low strength thread locker. That way it prevents stuff from backing out to boot. So not only is it corking up an oil leak, it keeps your stuff in place, but it does a better job of sealing up against oil than what Loctite Blue does. And it don't take much, guys. Just put just a little dab on there. You ain't got to just glop it on with a trowel. I may need to retire this tube of Teflon dope, because right now it looks like it needs a couple of bottles of Pedialyte and a big orange pill. Now, guys, also you want to pay attention to your bolt lengths going into the nose cone here, because you're going to have one bolt that's longer than the rest of them. You're going to have one bolt that's longer than the rest of them, and then you're going to have, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that are all the same length. Then you're going to have one that's a little bit shorter than the rest of them. That guy goes right there in that bottom corner cut on the cam cover. Now, if your cam cover doesn't have that counterbore area, don't be surprised. The late model covers didn't use that, but they're floating around out there in the wild, okay? Just be aware of it. So let's run these in, get it tightened up, tightened down. Another thing I like to do, I always start at the bottom on something that's holding fluid, oil, lube, whatever. Start at the bottom and work your way up, but do it in a crisscross pattern. That way it pulls it in at the bottom and it rolls it up. That way you're not inadvertently pulling a cover apart or trying to pull it away from the gasket surface whenever you torque the bolts down. Now, don't He-Man these things down all the way until you know you got your cover down square and flush. Then you can go back and you can apply a torque to them. Yeah, see? It moved. That's because it was hung up on the dowel pin up here on the top. That's why we don't tighten everything down in one step, kids. Walk it down, take it down nice and even. Make sure everything's sitting where it needs to be before you just gronk on it. Oh yeah, it moved quite a bit. Okay, calibrated elbow time. Click, 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 clicky, 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 click, and clicky, click. No, it's not a torque wrench. Yes, I'm asking you guys to envision with me, okay? Ew. Ugh. Man, I thought those days were long over. Well, and we got grandkids now, so I guess they're right around the corner again. Ah! So we're in, we're torqued down, everything good there. Yeah. And we still got play. Just as a side note here, just for a sanity check, just in case you're worried about it, remember where I showed y'all how we were going down through the holes in the case there for measuring our camshaft end play? If you look straight down in the rear tappet block hole, you're going to be able to see that breather gear where it spins inside of its bore for the cutout that vents to the cam chest. Before you drop your tappet blocks and lifters in there, roll that thing around to where you can catch the edge of it with a pick or something. Scoot it side to side. Make sure you got end play. If you do, you're good. Oh yeah, we are good in the neighborhood there. Whew, had to open up the garage door, let the breeze flow a little bit. It's hot. All right, so now we got our cam cover bolted on, got the cam in, we got our timing marks lined up, all that stuff. Let's drop our tappet blocks in there real quick. That way we can have the cam chest sealed up and we'll be done there and good to go. Just to kind of touch back on the whole AFM gasket thing, these tappet block gaskets that I'm using from Comedic, they're made out of that same material as the cam cover gasket was. That way, it allows it to conform and, make up for, bad spots, things like that. They work way better than the papers. Trust me, guys, this is an area where it is definitely worth spending a little bit of extra coin on because it's going to save you a lot of bullshit from the little pain in the ass common oil leaks. You're going to go there, and you're going to go there. Now, I know I say this jokingly about checking to make sure you got the right gasket in the right spot on your tappet blocks. It is entirely possible to get one flipped upside down or installed incorrectly, and it will either leak or worse, it's going to block off the oil supply hole that comes out of the cam chest going to the tappet block, and you're not going to have any oil supply going to your valve train. No bueno, not good. Hey, check it out. Time out for some cool tool speak here, all right? Now, the thing is, at work, I've got a couple of 1/4-inch ratchets that are extremely low profile head from a company called Easy Red. And they're a flex head ratchet, which comes in handy, I'm not going to lie, but it's not something that I have an absolute need for all that often. The main thing is they got a real thin profile head on them, and they're double-ended to where one end has a conventional 1/4-inch socket holder, but the other end has a 1/4-inch bit holder. That way I can use like screwdriver bits, Torx bits, low profile stubby stuff, things like that. And I was looking for something like that for here at the house. I came across these. I'm going to give them a try and see how they work out. But so far, the bang for the buck potential is pretty high. Now, these are an Amazon buy, guys, and I'm going to have you a link for it down in the description on this video, okay? So if you're interested, check them out. Now, full disclosure, these are from my affiliates link on Amazon. So if you buy one of these, I might make about 2 pennies. So, yeah, there you go. But it allows me to keep track of this stuff for you guys, and I can put it in a list. That way, if somebody asks me about it 6 months from now, I can go back to it and remember it. These are from a company called Genizern. Yeah. Don't ask me to spell it. Couldn't help you. But the cool thing about them is it's a 3-piece ratchet set. Now, and also it comes with a bit holder. Now, this is going to go like in an impact driver, something like that. It's got a ball detent to where it holds it in, but it's impact rated, so you can use it repeatedly without blowing it up. Also, it's got a nifty little magnet in there that seems to be pretty damn stout so far. That ain't why I bought these, though. That was a convenient freebie that came with them. These are a very small 1/4-inch drive ratchet. Now, they have the traditional push-to-release detent for your socket to hold it in place to where it doesn't fall down into the nether whenever you're in a little tight spot. They got flippy levers to reverse them, which I like. They don't have the little stupid button or something like that like one of my ratchets at work has. But These are a very fine thread ratchet. Like really fine. I don't know the technical jargon on how many degrees of turn they are, but it's really damn fine. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say they're probably 4 degree, probably smaller than that. But yeah, we'll go with that. They got a nice handle shape to them. They're rounded, but you got it plenty enough to where you can grab a hold of it and it not slip out of your hands. The cool thing is it's a three-piece set. It's got the normal ratchet, and then it's got a ratchet that has a detent ring to hold your bits in place, and it's got a thumb wheel on it to where you can get in the little tight spots and start it in place while you're holding a bit in there. And again, it's reversible. And plus also, it has this one where it's a very low profile with a magnetic retention. Again, reversible, just like the other ones. They're all the same tooth count in the head. They are very fine, and the finish on these, as far as the pawl teeth and the head goes and the ratchet body, it's very slick. They're not real crunchy. They're not real grindy. I haven't opened these things up to grease them or service them or do anything like that. They are nice and smooth out of the box. So if you're interested in them or you want to add them to the arsenal, check that link down there in the description. And yeah, you know, maybe if enough of you guys jump on board with this, I might be able to buy myself a stick of gum in about 2 years' time. Now here's why I bought these. So let's get the tappet block screws back in this thing. And again, these screw holes go all the way down to the interior of the cam chest, so we're going to put some goop on them, all right, just to make sure that we don't have any oil creep up around the threads. And again, it does not take much, guys. Now I'm going to run these down, but I'm not going to tighten them. We're just taking up all the extra bolt, if you will. Okay, now I know that Jim's makes a tappet block alignment tool for panhead, shovelhead, Evo, anything with bolt-in tappet blocks on a big twin. And yes, there is merit there, okay? Basically what they are, it's two oversized bolts that have a taper turned into them, and that taper ends in the 1/4-inch thread pitch that you use for your tappet block bolts here. And in the way the theory is supposed to work, they're supposed to align off of the bolt holes when it engages in the taper, and that's supposed to keep your tappet wheels tracking straight on the cam. Now, as tight as the fit is on these tappet block bolts, number one, I'm not concerned about it because the potential for movement here is so small, it's not even funny. But if you've got some tappet blocks that are of questionable lineage, or if they've been around the block a time or two and you're still trying to use them, do this. Let me move this where y'all can see better. Close the door, that way you can see without the glare. Okay, I got my front tappet block. I've got the screws run down to where they're just touching, but they're not tight by any means. Let's take those screws and let's back them off to where they just turn free. I'm talking like a quarter, half turn at the most here. But you want to hold the tappet block down to keep it level on the case. Take your little rubber hammer. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, we know we're seated. We know we're square there. Now, grab it. See if you can rotate it any. Now, I can creep that ever so slightly, and I mean damn slightly. If I had to guess it, well, you know what? I don't have to guess. Here, let's find out for sure. Let me move you guys. Okay, check it out. Got my handy little dial test indicator sitting here on the edge of the tappet block, and it's just sticking to the edge of the motor stand. But watch this. Watch the needle on the dial test indicator. That's a damn small amount of movement, guys. That's about 0.008 of an inch. So just to keep everybody out there in the internet and YouTube landia happy, we're going to split that difference, and we're going to snug it down right there in the middle between those 2 points of movement, and we'll call that centered up, at least close enough for government work. There. I hope that satisfied your nerd need for the day, okay? Now, I know I joke about shit like that, but the thing is, say hypothetically you have not quite 0.010 of an inch like we just saw with that dial indicator. Okay, let's round it up to 0.010 of an inch, just to make the math simpler. What's half of 10? That's 5. So we cock the block over. See what I did there? Keep it clean, y'all. Mama watches these. Remember that. So what we do is we rotate the tappet block to where we're at our midway point between our offsets that we see from where it can move. And in theory, we should have our tappets aligned directly on top of the rolling path of the cam lobe. Now the thing is, that Jim's tool I was talking about, it's working on the same theory. It's just it's centering off of the center of the bolt holes to keep it aligned that way. You ain't got to have a fancy tool, you just got to have some kind of a tool. And there you go, guys. That's the ins and outs of putting together a solid valve train in the bottom end of any kind of a Harley cone motor, panhead, shovelhead, Evo, whatever the case may be. Now, granted, there's a lot of areas here where we spent a lot of time and we started looking at a lot of the little particular stuff. But that's what makes the difference between a motor that runs nice and smooth and doesn't make any abnormal noises and one that sounds like a rock crusher whenever it's sitting there idling after it's gotten good and hot, okay? Trust me, if you guys have been around an old shovel head where it's got solid lifters in it and it's got a real sloppy cam chest, you know exactly the noise I'm talking about, okay? So once my valve stem seals quit making their tour of the map, so to speak, to where I can actually get them in my grubby little mitts and put them together in the heads and get the heads put together, we're going to bolt the top end on this motor, pistons, cylinders, heads, rocker boxes. I got a couple of tricks I want to show you guys on the rocker boxes, but I got to clean up the rocker boxes and do a little bit of polishing on them first. So that's going to wait until the next trip, okay? The next time we all gather around the old campfire here, we're putting together a damn shovelhead motor, okay? So stay tuned. Check it out for that shit. Guys, I'm going to tell you, I kind of felt bad about not having the parts to be able to put this thing together because I had planned on having this motor together this weekend for this installment of Ramblin' Parked, okay? Now, granted, it would have made for a hell of a long episode, but in the grand scheme of things, this probably works out better because I know that I have a tendency to go on and delve into a lot of detail stuff, and it draws it out and makes it kind of hard for some people to watch just because they don't have as much time to sit down and watch a 90-minute video. We're going to split it up. We're going to get it together. We're going to put it together because here in about a week, we're going to have a frame to put together to where we can start building a damn motorcycle, okay? Now, if you guys like what we do here, or you're just kind of wondering who in the hell this Bumpkin is, go check down the Patreon link down here in the comments, okay? We got free membership options on our Patreon. We've always had free membership options, and we always will continue to have them in the future. All the tech tips and stuff that I share, that stuff's always been 100% free, and it always will be, because we don't believe in that bullshit of hiding behind a paywall. Knowledge is free. Knowledge is something that is meant to be shared. It needs to be shared, because that's what we're about here at JTMJ. We want to keep old bikes out on the road, running up and down the highway, because that's where they belong. They don't deserve to be locked up in a garage somewhere or underneath a tarp in somebody's barn just slowly rotting them to death, okay? Put them out there. Get some miles on them. Let them stretch their legs a little bit. That's what they want to do. Anyway, guys, that's about enough for me right here, right now. I have to confer with the beloved wife unit because she has just recently returned from her birthday haul. She she makes it a game every year of going out and hitting all the coupons and all the stuff that she gets in her email and everything. And she takes it as a personal mission to see just how close to bankruptcy she can get to bringing some of the companies that offer birthday promos and things like that. So I'm going to go check that out because apparently one of her stops was Victoria's Secret. Hey! And anyway, yeah, I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Just remember, I love you. I'll see you next week.
Force will be with you, always.